so I'm Maarten Vanderstukken, plant breeder at SESVanderhave, as you could see in the movie already. And I prepared a few slides showing a little bit more specifications on the other sugar crop, sugar beet. A bit on the work we do on drought tolerance and the progress that we make on that, and then a little sidetrack to our tropical beet concept, which we are rolling out in India, for instance. So sugar beet, it's not a perennial crop in contrast to sugar cane. So it's sown and then 5-6 months later the roots are harvested, piled up, as you can see there on the picture, and transported to the factory and processed for sugar extraction. Yields typically are 80 to 100 tons of root yield per hectare, and in some regions up to 140 tons, and in more stressful regions a little bit less. Sugar content is typically 15 to 20%, and this results in a white sugar yield at the factory of, let's say, 17, 18 ton on average per hectare of white sugar. It's also used as an energy crop, just like sugar cane. Most used byproducts are the leaves, the pulp, the molasses, mainly for animal feed purposes. Leaves also as an organic fertilizer. And like mentioned in the video, I think a big difference or a big strength of our crop is the low water requirement. So even in tropical regions or in regions with very high irradiation, it never exceeds 8,000 liters per hectare. So on average, the water consumption is about 3 times lower than that of sugar cane. And a second interesting characteristic of sugar beet is that it has a very small and simple genome, which allows for a very active and dynamic breeding. And this you can see on the graph on the right, which shows a bit of the history of sugar beet breeding. And then you can see that, we'll try to bring up this pointer. Here in the 1950s, the average sugar beet variety still yielded around 5 tons of sugar per hectare, while today, like I mentioned before, we are around above 15 tons per hectare. So that's the progress that we make, and we still achieve a yield increase, a sugar yield increase of 1.5% per year. And more in the last decades, we combine this increase with increasing more and more, or bringing in more and more disease tolerance to a multitude of diseases that our crop encounters. So sugar beet, it's grown in a bit more than 50 countries. The main areas are, of course, West Europe, Russia, USA. So it's often considered as the temperate sugar crop, but in fact, there are also substantial, significant growing regions in Egypt, Morocco, Iran, Chile, and in fact, even India. And in fact, those are the regions where the acreage is expanding mostly. Another thing that to bring to your attention is that sugar beet is mainly grown under rain-fed conditions. Only about 15% of the global sugar beet cultivation takes place under irrigated conditions. So that's also very different from cane. This means the fact that it's mainly grown under rain-fed conditions means that it gets exposed to drought, and sometimes severe droughts, like was mentioned in the movie already. And here the little bar graph shows the impact that drought-tolerant varieties and breeding for drought-tolerant varieties can have. So current drought-tolerant varieties, under a severe drought, they lose around 10% in root yield, while a regular drought-susceptible variety easily loses 30% in root yield. So that's a significant impact. Also important is that these drought-tolerant varieties can combine this drought tolerance with competitive performance under well-watered conditions as well. So this is an interesting angle from a breeder to further work on this genetic variation that already exists. And so we have intensified our breeding programs for drought tolerance as well. So there we start with identifying the best performing varieties under drought in the fields, heavily relying on remote sensing technologies also for that. And those varieties we take to indoor greenhouse screening platforms where we actually verify whether this increased drought tolerance is triggered by an improved water use efficiency rather than with an increased water uptake efficiency, because the latter, we believe, is not really a sustainable strategy because it will only further deplete the soil water availability. So we mainly focus on increasing water use efficiency, and we experience that this is possible without triggering any yield penalties or so on. So our goal is to further improve, and we are quite ambitious in this, further improve the performance of our varieties under these droughts, which occur more and more frequently with climate change. Then my last slide, I make a little sidestep to our tropical beets and a little bit on the adoption in the Indian cane regions. So what is a tropical beet? It is, first of all, a sugar beet variety that is adapted to the tropical climate, so high temperatures, also high night temperatures compared to what you get in the more temperate regions. And of course, if you move into new regions, you experience new diseases. Sclerosium, as you can see here, is on the picture, is a nasty example of that. So then we also have to develop and breed for tolerances against these diseases, and only then you have a variety that can sustain profitable growth in the new region. So the feedback that we get from the farmers in India that have adopted our crop and started growing it is the short cycle. So with a cycle of 5 to 6 months in a subtropical or tropical region, you can achieve 2 cropping cycles a year. And the fact that you rotate crops also contributes to the maintenance of good soil quality, good soil integrity, which they also appreciate. And if you steer or you plan it well, you can steer your harvest towards a period when cane supply is lower, providing the factory with a prolonged supply of sugar bulk source material. Another advantage is that sugar beets, the wild ancestor of sugar beets, originates from coastal regions. It even grows on the beach, as you can see here on this picture, which means that by nature it has a high tolerance to salinity pressure. And like it was mentioned before, it has a quite low water requirement, which is very interesting, of course, from an irrigation perspective. And yeah, I also mentioned the breeding progress already, which is rather convenient, because if you run into some kind of agronomical problem, a new disease or any other issue, there's a very high chance that you can breed to overcome the problem. And then finally, so the possible cropping systems that have been explored and implemented in India, in the region where sugar beet has been introduced, is the most adopted system is one where between the renewal of a cane plantation, they fit in a sugar beet cultivation. So have a little rotation with sugar beets. Another possibility is that you combine sugar beet with another sugar crop, sweet sorghum, for instance. And the interesting thing about that is then you can combine 2 sugar crops within 1 year. And then the third option is what we know best from the temperate region, is that you rotate sugar beet with cereals or other crops. And in more southern regions, subtropical, tropical regions, this has an advantage again that you can do 2 croppings within one year. And maintaining a better soil quality by rotating. So this was what I had to share. If you want to read a bit more about tropical beet concept and related topics, I can refer you to a brochure that our communication department made. It's on our website, and I'm happy to take further questions later on.